Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's your boy Devvon and welcome to another Help Me Devvon tutorial. And today, in this Help Me Devvon tutorial, I'll be showing you guys how to get your compressor settings for vocals with 3 simple techniques. I'm going to basically play a vocal that I have right now, and I'm going to bypass the compressor that I have back and forth so you can get an idea of what this accomplished. Check this out. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna listen to it without the compressor that I have set on it first. And then I'll bypass it back and forth as it's playing so you get an idea of the effect without first.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying, yeah. Know I get toxic when you out of pocket, yeah. Go that back and forth, thinking about leaving you. Honestly, I don't know what I see in you. Know you hungry for answers, but what they feed you. Tell me why everybody misleads.
Okay, so that is basically the compressor settings that I've come up with in my R comp. And when you hear that back and forth and that bypass, you start to notice that when the compressor is disengaged, you feel like the vocal is kind of leaning in the back of the actual music, and it kind of feels like it just loses that punch and that power. And when it's engaged, it feels like it sits better on top of that beat. I'm gonna show you how I got to this place and how I get my compressor settings for my vocals a lot of times with 3 simple techniques. Let's get to it. Okay, so first things first, let's just put this compressor to its factory default. So let's put it right to the very freshest setting that it has. So this is the default setting. Now, the first tip or first trick that I'm going to show you in these steps is setting your threshold and ratio. Now, when it comes to setting your threshold and ratio, this is probably one of the more important things to notice. When you're setting your ratio, or basically what ratio is saying, hey, for every, for instance, a 2-to-1 ratio, is saying for every 2 dB above the threshold, only allow 1 through. If you set your ratio to 4-to-1, you're basically saying, hey, for every 4 dB over the threshold, I want you to only allow 1 through. When you're setting your ratio, it's the difference between you setting the chop of those peaks to this versus this. This is a very hard ratio. This is a softer ratio or lower ratio. What you're getting when you do a harder ratio is you're getting a tighter sound. It kind of resembles that of a limiter. So when it comes to vocals, I tend to want to go to a lower ratio. And the only reason I like to go to a lower ratio for my vocals a lot of the times, not all the time, is because I still want those transients. I don't really want to chop my transients off so hard because I still want that vocal to sound dynamic. So for me personally, I tend to reach for a lower ratio when it comes to my compression on my vocals. Okay, so with that tidbit, now let's get into how to set it. So like I told you, I like to set my ratios to a lower ratio. So I like to land on this number 1.72 or 2-to-1, which is very typical of compression for vocals. You don't have to be married to this. And also you can experiment with the sound to kind of decide what ratio you want as far as making it sound tighter or more loose or more dynamic. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is, the very first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set my attack to the fastest attack that my compressor allows, and I'm gonna set my release to the slowest release that it possibly has. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna solo the vocal, and I'm going to take my threshold and I'm gonna bring it down until I'm getting, say, about 12 dB of gain reduction. I'm using an extreme method. Check this out.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying, yeah. You know I get toxic when you out of pocket.
Okay, so the vocal sounds super tight. It's ripping the transients. Everything is basically taken away from it. There's barely any dynamics. Stick with me. This is how I set it up and how I start with the threshold and ratio. So that was the first step, setting that threshold and ratio to a point where I'm getting a ton of gain reduction around that 12 dB, and then you'll see what I do next. So we got that. Let's hear this within the music as it stands for right now.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying.
Okay, so basically you can't even hear the vocal. Basically all the volume that was there, we've taken it out because we're getting 12 dB of gain reduction. Stick with me. Now, the next step that we're gonna do is we're gonna play this vocal within the music, and we're gonna set our attack and release. So this is step 2, setting the attack and release. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to back off the attack until it feels good. And then I'm going to take the release down until it feels good. So basically, as I take this attack slider and move it to the right, what I'm doing is I'm allowing more transient information to cut through. This is going to make the vocals sound a lot more poppy. It's going to give it a lot more openness, and you're going to notice the vocal kind of opens up because it's allowing those transients to cut through. Realize, when I have a really fast attack, what's happening is it's chopping or hitting or compressing those transients sooner. And what I want to accomplish is I want you to control those transient moments, but at the same time, I still want a little bit of that transient moment to kind of cut through the mix so that it still feels open in that regard. When I take the release and I make it faster, I'm telling the compressor, hey, I want you to release this compression after a certain amount of time. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna make the vocal feel a lot more punchy. It's going to cut, and that compression is going to compress but let go, compress but let go, compress but let go. So that's what I'm going to try to accomplish. This is based for me personally off of feeling, not just some thing that you just kind of do and just kind of set and forget. So I'll show you exactly that. So let's engage step 2. So we're gonna play it with the music because basically what I'm trying to accomplish is breathing, or basically trying to get this compressor or this vocal to really sound musical within the actual music to fit. So I'm going to back off on the attack until it feels good. Check this out.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying. Toxic, you out of pocket. Yeah.
Okay, so right there, as I backed off or slowed down the compressor, or said, hey, I want you to not catch those transients so quickly, let some of that through, I found a little spot where I said, oh, okay, that feels a little bit more open. I feel like I'm getting those transients. And what you'll notice is that scratchier sound where it feels like it just gets a little bit more open and those transients are starting to kind of cut through. So I've slowed down the attack to ease up on its timing of when it compresses. Stick with me. Now, let's set our release time. And basically, as I move this slider to the left, I'm basically telling the compressor, hey, let go of the compressor at this time, okay? So let's try this out. Let's speed up the release, meaning let go of the compression until it feels better.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying. Toxic when you out of pocket, yeah. Go like back and forth, thinking about leaving you. Honestly, I don't know what I see in you. You hungry for answers.
Cool. Now I've set my release to a point where I say, okay, I feel like it's hanging on my ear. It feels like it kind of breathes within the music now this time, and it feels a lot better as opposed to when it did when I had all that compression on it. Now, for the very final step, we're gonna go back to our threshold and makeup gain. What do I mean by this? Basically, now all that volume that we lost, I'm going to bring all of that volume back, and I'm gonna bypass it back and forth until the levels match from the original. This is the real secret technique to setting that compressor, because what you wanna do is, before you engage that compressor or use that particular compressor to get it in time, what you want to do is you want to compensate for that volume. That volume that you set before was the volume that your ears kind of told you, or that feeling was, oh, this feels like it's the right volume, but I just need to control those dynamics. So what I'm going to do is, now that we tighten those dynamics, I'm going to bring back the volume that we had previously and see if I actually did accomplish a better vocal that sits in the mix. Stay with me. So now we're going to go over to our makeup gain and our threshold to accomplish this. What I'm gonna do for the moment though is, and sometimes this can be considered taboo, I'm gonna solo the vocal. And what I'm gonna try to do is match the volume that we lost originally. So let's do that. Let's match the volume that we had before the compressor.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying, yeah. You know I get toxic when you out of pocket, yeah. Go like back and forth, thinking about leaving you. Honestly, I don't know what I see in you. Know you hungry for answers, but what they feeding you. Tell me why everybody misleading you. Girl, you know the rules. Everybody sitting around and waiting for our downfall. Fill you up with bullshit. Tell me what you down for. Feeling like I'm bossing in the end. Now I'm down for.
Okay, so I've set the gain to make up for what it lost, and I've matched the volumes. Now let's see what that sounds like within the music. Did we accomplish something better? Check this out. I'll bypass it back and forth. Check out what it was before and now after. Before.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying, yeah, yeah. Know I get toxic when you out of pocket, yeah, yeah. Go like back and forth, thinking about leaving you. Honestly, I don't know what I see in you. Know you hungry for answers, but
so now we have something that sits better within the music. You can clearly hear that. It's more upfront. It feels like the quieter parts got louder and the more loud parts got quieter. Or I hope I said that right, where I said the quiet parts got louder and the louder parts got quieter, giving us a more cohesive vocal that really sits on top of that beat, where you're not fighting with the fader or the volume saying to yourself, oh man, now it's too loud. Oh no, now it's too quiet. Oh man, now you're really bridging the gap or connecting or basically closing the gap between that quiet stuff and the loud stuff. And that's what basically gives you that more cohesive sound that really sits in your mix, where you are not losing that vocal at moments in time. And this works for a number of different things, instruments, etc. One last thing that I would just want to make note of is, I know that you noticed that this ARC is on, and a lot of people get on me about this as far as it being an automatic release. Well, I've noticed that no matter if you have the ARC on or manual, that there's still an effect that it has on the release. So even if I take it to manual, let's just listen to what that sounds like before and after. Check this out.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying, yeah, yeah. Know I get toxic when you out of pocket, yeah, yeah.
So you could put it in manual and it still has a sound and it listens to your release times and things of that nature. I usually go with manual, so I highly recommend you hitting manual when you have this compressor engaged. And very last thing I kind of want to give you a tidbit on. If you feel as if you have a little bit too much compression on the vocal, basically the very last thing you can do is say, hey, I know I'm getting about 8 to 9 dB of compression with this particular setting I have. You can back off on that threshold until you feel a little bit more comfortable. So I'll solo it and I'll back off on the threshold until I feel a little bit more comfortable about it.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying.
Cool, so now I'm getting about 6 dB of gain reduction. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make sure that my volumes match from the previous thing. This is such an important part of it, matching the volume that you originally had, because it's gonna allow you to not get fooled by just a volume difference. So let's make sure our volumes match.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying, yeah, yeah. You know I get toxic when you out of pocket, yeah, yeah.
Cool. Now let's hear that within the music, before and after.
Please tell me the truth, cut the lying. You covering that shit up with the crying. Go that back and forth with the lying. The that you used to know is dying, yeah, yeah. Know I get toxic when you out of pocket, yeah, yeah. Go like back and forth.
Okay, so now I have a vocal that sits better within my mix, and you can decide whether you want more compression or less. Just make sure if you're deciding if you like the sound of more compression, that you're looking at your threshold and your actual makeup gain to compensate for that volume, whether it's too loud now or whether it's too quiet. As long as you are constantly going back to your makeup gain and listening to the volume of the original before the compression, you will be in a much safer place. Now, I like to use this extreme technique sometime when I'm really trying to figure out and dial in those settings. But this is just a really simple technique that you can use in 3 steps to basically get you in a stronger place. A lot of times I know a lot of you may complain about, hey, I just turn my compressor on and I just start moving knobs. But maybe if I give you this methodology, or method, sorry, you can kind of get closer to knowing how to actually use that, and kind of how to go by it case by case with just knowing how to do this technique. So in conclusion, setting your threshold and ratio first, then putting an extreme attack, meaning extremely fast, an extreme release, meaning extremely slow, backing off on both of those until it feels right or feels a lot better to you, and then going back to the threshold and gain to make up for what you've lost from that compression. So I hope that was helpful. This was my tutorial on how you can set your compression settings or find your compression settings for your vocals in 3 easy steps. I really hope that was helpful. Please make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Also, make sure you follow us at HelpMeDevvon on Instagram, and make sure you also join our Discord community, which I'll leave a link in the description below, with a lot of other engineers like yourself, trading secrets and getting game. And make sure you listen to the My Audio Nerds podcast every Wednesday, on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. I hope that was helpful, and until next time, you guys.